Okay, let's go ahead and get started so that we can make sure that we get all the questions and answers done today. So welcome to another Ask the Expert event on the Now community. Today we're going to have Cliff introducing our experts and for our demo. Take it away.
Awesome. Really looking forward to this today. First, my name is Cliff Harris. I lead risk for the slide, our verticals here at ServiceNow. And today we have quite a few people that are going to be presenting, but let me first start by introducing Brian Risman, who is a partner at Edgile, and he's going to give an overview of the company and then introduce the other people who are here today.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Cliff. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Brian Risman with Edgile. I'm a partner with Edgile, and I look after our ServiceNow business and our relationship with our partners, ServiceNow. We are a premier partner of ServiceNow, integrating the integrated risk management, GRC, and security solutions. Joined here today with David Decter as well. David is our lead national IRM partner. Both David and myself come from backgrounds in the Big Four, which is really representative of a lot of our folks from Edgile. A lot of us come from big consulting firms like the Big Four, as well as from industry. We have folks who are CISOs and chief risk officers as part of our firm. Also bringing to the table, we also have folks from some of the top engineering programs in the U.S., and we're joined today also by Gordon Hazard and Will Mathias. They are two of our lead ServiceNow architects, and they'll be actually getting hands on the keyboard in some of our demo environments today, showing you some of the solutions that we're building as it relates to healthcare. So really, as it relates to Edgile, it's bringing that functional industry experience together with that technical engineering experience. We focus on three main areas as an organization. One of them is this integrated risk management and GRC, which we'll speak about today. We do that exclusively now with ServiceNow, given the power of the platform that I know many of you are realizing today. Also, as an organization, we partner with Microsoft, specifically from a cloud security perspective, as organizations are moving into the cloud with Azure Active Directory, Office 365, et cetera. We unblock those compliance challenges that organizations have for moving to the cloud. And lastly, we work from an identity and access management perspective with partners like SailPoint, Saviynt, et cetera. All of those are also partners of the ServiceNow ecosystem. And one of the things we'll talk about later is how we bringing those hooks back into the ServiceNow platform to really get the value of your hybrid environments that you likely have today at your organization. So we're very much looking forward to the discussion. Today, I know there's a QA channel there as well that we'll be monitoring. And with that, we'll turn it right back over to Cliff to get us started with our first question.
Awesome. So we have some of the questions that have come in, and what we're going to do is we're going to show you the question on the screen. Typically, I'm not going to ask it word for word, but I'll give some context behind it, and then we'll go ahead and hand it over to the Edgile team to answer. One of the first things that I see in helping a lot of our customers who are new into the risk space or the integrated risk management space is they typically don't understand what a typical project looks like. So how are you guys able to start with having these customers and walking them through this journey?
Thanks, Cliff. This is David Decter speaking, and what I'm going to talk through is our approach through incremental quick wins to help ensure that the client's management team stays engaged, is getting a lot of value, and we're really taking advantage of the visualization capabilities from ServiceNow. So what's going on with really all client environments is management has a desire to have a significant amount of confidence, detail, and precision in their understanding of risk and compliance. At the same time, they have very limited resources available. So they need a smart way to walk through in a defendable fashion how to build that confidence up and really surgically hone in on where to invest the time and money in the detailed control testing. So we start with a 5-pass approach. Pass 1 is a risk register. It's not the typical risk register, but rather the foundation for achieving integrated risk and compliance management. It is built on harmonized laws, regulations, industry standards, as well as an onboarding of the client-specific policies and standards that relate. We then go through and we'll either provide a tailored risk methodology or use the client's pre-existing risk methodology, depending on where they're at in a maturity perspective. We will rate both inherent and residual risk and set the foundation from a risk register perspective of where those most significant risks may lie in the organization topically. Pass 2, we begin to transition now to making this more tangible by defining with the client the operating environment, your processes, your business functions, your applications, infrastructure, and facilities all get modeled out. And what we then do is take the output of that risk register and marry it up from a risk relevancy perspective. Pass 3, we then take the output, building on each of these steps, and create diagnostics, rapid information gathering tools, surveys with easy to understand yes, no, we don't know style responses, and that allows for the client to very quickly hone in on where the field may believe there are some potential gaps. Task 4, we're now moving into a more moderate confidence level. We do a deep dive assessment where we're documenting with the client the actual controls in place and judging the control design adequacy. At that point, we may create policy exceptions, and then moving on to pass 5, we move into control testing, taking advantage of the ServiceNow audit module and surgically working with the clients to understand their population, the sample size, obtain evidence, and provide high confidence in the control operating effectiveness. And through that journey, we're working through this process, and as you can note at the bottom of the slide, we are incrementally standing up and tailoring the ServiceNow platform for the client. Thank you.
So, and just one quick question on this. So is the goal that at each pass they get more and more functionality?
That's right.
So they could really just start using the risk register right away after first pass, and then you're just throwing things on top of it more and more.
Exactly.
Cool. So incremental wins, but that's also a quick win right away that they could show that, hey, we have some ROI here.
Exactly. That risk register exercise, Cliff, can take something like 4 to 6 weeks. We'll actually show you an example of some of those outputs,
right.
In a little bit. But those, that's really some high value, quick wins you can get from, a GRC program.
Exactly.
Oftentimes people think these are multi-month, multi-year journeys, and where is that ROI going to come?
Right.
Within 6 weeks, we can get you some executive reporting. There's value there.
Yeah, exactly.
And we learned this really from feedback of our clients that traditionally they're being steered to go stand up policy
right.
lifecycle management. Ostensibly, they already have policies, so the value isn't really that strong and exciting for them.
Yeah.
Whereas this risk register is highly visible and gives them a massive win that they didn't have before.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go on to question 2, which is near and dear to my heart. You guys obviously have a lot of content. I think you are by far the company that has done the most with our ServiceNow store. So what are some healthcare specific content that you have available or that's coming?
Fantastic. No, thanks, Cliff. This is Brian Risman again with Edgile. So if you were to go to store.servicenow.com,
good plug.
Thank
good
you.
Plug.
The links will be provided. There are 18 applications that we have on the ServiceNow store. 16 of those are specific to content by industry. So if you think about all of the laws, regulations, frameworks, and mandates that healthcare organizations need to comply with, we have packaged those up in total 16 different industry packs. The 6 you see at the top here in green are the ones that are likely applicable for those on the phone with us today and healthcare organizations. And we've made small little nuances there, to see those carve-outs that you have when you see a healthcare provider with research, very different when someone who's not involved in research. There's some different nuances there as it relates to the requirements that you need to comply with. So what we've done is really package these up very nicely. We have 550 laws, regs, and frameworks that are part of that content subscription that we've then mapped to these, in this case, these 6 different industry solution packs here. We've taken things like HIPAA and PCI, NIST, all the privacy stuff, all the security stuff. And what we do is we take all of those together. We then take our clients' existing policies and standards and wire those all together, really decompose those into a set of requirements that really allow us to drive that path 1 that David was talking about before with that risk register. And what that allows you to do is 2 things with our content. It allows you to get the compliance view by saying, here's what PCI says, includes the verbatim source text, from that law and that standard. Here's what HIPAA says, et cetera. And so you can manage this from a compliance perspective, but also manage it from a risk perspective because we've integrated our risk taxonomy and our risk methodology into those harmonized set of requirements, which we'll show you in a little bit. We do update that content quarterly. So those who do subscribe for that annual subscription does get access to 4 quarterly updates based on that annual sort of subscription that you get. And that is all available on the ServiceNow store.
And, that leads into the next question. It's almost like we planned it. So, and to that end, one of the questions I get a lot from customers is they say, okay, we're going to bring in all our laws and regulations. And I typically say that's a great start, but what does it look like 5 years from now? What does it look like 5 months from now? So as the customers, the healthcare organization, healthcare is unique in that it's become a flashpoint politically. It's been a flashpoint economically. It's driving, close to 15% of our economy. They're going to be heavily regulated. So what does that challenge look like, and how are you guys addressing new laws, new regulations?
Yeah, absolutely. This stuff's changing, as we know, on an almost weekly basis, if not daily basis, right? So we have a team of lawyers here that are monitoring all of those changes. As we provide those quarterly updates, we're actually giving a forward look and letting our subscribers know what's coming, when do you have to comply by, and that's all being published as part of those quarterly updates. With that being said, though, you need to then evolve your program based on those updates that are being made. So actually, one of the things that was actually a joint request that came from some folks that we've been working with at ServiceNow, coupled with one of our large healthcare providers, who said, we need a tool in order to go kind of manage all of those regulatory changes. So what we've done is that we built a workflow capability with ServiceNow called our regulatory change management application. That is one of those things on the store that you can purchase and subscribe to. And this is a whole kind of closed loop workflow that will allow you to then determine how you want to treat the retiring or the addition of new laws, regs, and frameworks. So let's use an example, right? So we were, as of Q4 or the second half of last year, if an organization had everything set up based on kind of the current set of obligations that they had, but then as of January, everyone has to comply with CCPA. Right. So CCPA now is a new source that needs to be then kind of added to everyone's framework and set of requirements. You would use this reg change application to then, add in a new source, CCPA. For those of you who've gotten into privacy, GDPR and CCPA, although both privacy are actually slightly different animals, so you'll need to go through an entire treatment process to determine what are my impacts to my policies, to my standards, to my baseline controls and actual controls based on the changes of the requirements coming from CCPA. So this is a whole kind of closed loop workflow process, assign tickets and owners for people to go make updates to the material that's, appropriate, to them. With that, though, what we do want to quickly show is I'm going to turn it over to Will Matthias, who is one of our lead architects, and he's going to take the reins for a quick minute here and actually show you what that looks like. And he'll spend 3 to 5 minutes just bringing that to life a little bit.
Thank you, Brian. I need to, there we go. So I want to start by showing the authority documents that we were talking about. So when we get content, what we're going to provide is the authority document records and the citations and the control objectives. And these are going to be targeted for the different industries that those content packs are targeted at. Give me an example of an authority document. Basically, we're going to include all sorts of details and break down these citations specifically into elements that can then be mapped to a control objective. So these control objectives are going to be manageable and be able to provide the controls for the different applications and entities. Now, in terms of the regulatory change management application, the way that is managed is through campaigns. You could create a brand new campaign. The first step is to select the sources. In my example here, this is for someone who has never seen the PCI. They haven't added it yet. So when they run this campaign, it's going to go through that list of authority documents. It's going to identify what doesn't already exist in their authority documents from our library, and it's going to select that that's a new one and allow them to choose what kind of activity they want to do. So you could look at this and you could get some information to decide whether this is something you want to add. And then you could decide what treatment. Also, you can look at the existing library elements by doing show all. So this is showing not just the new values or what you've decided to add, but is showing all of the things that may have no changes that you might want to retire and replace with a new one. There's an approval process that this goes through. So this first stage, when you're doing the source selection, will go through an approval group. And with their approval, it'll move into the next stage, which is updating the guidance. So now what's happened is the authority documents and citations have been copied over, but the control objectives have not been added yet. And instead, what we've done is created tasks, and adding PCI has created 89 potential impacts on control objectives. So it's created these tasks for review. We're going to look at one, the two-factor authentication. And with that, we're going to be able to see that there was a baseline that was there previously, and we can modify that baseline to reflect the new source change. We also will be able to see what a baseline test procedure and a modified test procedure would look like. When we're looking at this, we will be given a list of all the citations that affect that control objective. So not only is this affecting the PCI that was just added, but it's showing that there were some previous citations, authority documents that were impacting this control objective that we need to consider as well. And that helps us to draft this baseline and make a decision about whether we think that this is a material change. Has adding this authority source required enough of a change that the control owners need to be involved? And we can say that yes, they should be aware that there was a change, but it can be handled as part of the normal control review process, or we can actually go in and require an immediate review of the control. If we choose the immediate review process, that will create these control review tasks. So again, we were looking at the two-factor authentication. In this example, we just had two applications that were impacted, and someone can go in and look at that. And now at the control level, they can set baselines for the actual control and the actual test procedure. And then there is a second approval process that will allow that to get approved. Ultimately, as you work through all of these stages with these different campaigns, you will be able to see a log of all the changes. So authority documents and citations that were moved in, a policy statement change, or a change to an actual control. And you'll have a log of all those along with the approvals. Brian, I guess I'll turn it back to you.
No, that was great, Will. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. I know reg chain is one of those good ones, but realistically speaking, I'm really excited about this next one because this is something that a lot of our customers struggle with. Historically, ServiceNow has been thought of as a IT tool based upon just being so popular as an IT ticketing system. So as we go through, how are you guys getting your multiple stakeholders together? So how are you bringing the different groups that aren't necessarily thought of as a ServiceNow customer into the fold here?
No, absolutely. And Will, if you do us a quick favor, if you stop sharing real quick, we're going to get the slides back to, there we go. No, and Clifton, thanks very much for that question there. So actually, one of the things that we are working with some stakeholders on is really, and we agree, right? This is not just an IT tool, not an IT platform. This is, enabling the business to work better. And it's really something that is really cross-stakeholder functionally, if you will. And what we found is that a lot of people need to get their fingerprints on certain activities really early on in the process. So what we've worked with some of our clients on is building what we've called a data classification engine that really front ends a lot of what we're doing from a GRC or IRM perspective. So that gives us the ability to think about, what does the legal team think about onboarding a new application? What does procurement think about it? What does ethics and compliance think about it? What does your SOX team? What does your GXP team? What is, your audit team, et cetera? So really cross-functional set of stakeholders to really think about what is the impact of bringing, in this case, an example, a new application, cloud application, whatever it is, into the environment. And we've set up a series of assessments and kind of gating questions to ultimately take people through a series of evaluations and assessments to determine data classification from a confidentiality, integrity, availability, regulatory, ethics and compliance, et cetera, standpoint. And on the back end of that, it does a couple things. It gives you your data classification, results, if you will, that ultimately, if it's an application, can feed into application portfolio management on the platform and ultimately make its way into the CMDB. But really what's most exciting from a GRC and IRM perspective is that it then is kind of the starting point, then trigger all the follow-on activities. So because a certain score was high, as an example, you might want to follow up and do a DPIA, a data privacy assessment. You might want to kick off your vendor risk assessment process. You might want to request a pen test or whatever it is. You can then basically have automatic triggers kick off all the follow-on activities, that are then required based on the results of this data classification and really satisfying multiple stakeholders in the organization, not just your typical IT and information security stakeholders. So we're going to switch back to Will for a quick minute here, and we're just going to show you what this looks like, and then we'll move on.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So we're looking at a data classification record. So there is a portal available, and someone would request to start this and would basically assign a set of an approvers. And this can be tailored to the audience. In this example, there's very specific classes of approvers. And then we walk through a process where we answer a series of questions. So starting off the process, we will answer these header questions, which is really getting an idea of what is being classified. So in this case, we're talking about that it's both an information system and a vendor. It's going to be a SaaS application. and we can get down into the details of how that's all answered. And again, if you pick different selections, these answers are choices are going to change in terms of what responses are required or available. And then I can save those changes, and with that information, I can calculate what classification questions and GXP questions are needed. So if I look into the classification questions, these are going to be divided into different areas such as confidentiality. And I can pick all sorts of values for those. And again, they're going to be dynamic depending on what answers are provided. Additional questions can be generated. And all of these are going to feed into a calculation that's going to generate those assessment values, those classification values. And with that, then, we're going to be able to have the ability to trigger off tasks, and these tasks can happen both before an approval, or they can happen, and then they would be considered consultation tasks. And these consultation tasks would be before the approval is put in. They can decide that I need to have a talk with my data protection experts to make sure that my answers to the classification questions were appropriate. Once the approval process goes through, then there's going to be additional tasks that are generated that are going to basically help track the progress of how those actual assessments are being done. So if I require data protection, it's going to then create a task that might be several weeks long. And again, that can also trigger a activity not just within the data classification, but downstream, and cause those assessments to be generated within ServiceNow itself. So Brian is going to go ahead and turn that back to you.
That was great. Thanks very much.
Alrighty, so this next question is also near and dear to my heart. So realistically speaking, I talk risk almost with one of our healthcare customers almost every single day. And one of the things that they talk about is being the overhead function. Just a lot of times they're not necessarily looked at as bringing a ton of value. So how are you able to help them transform the conversations they're having with their executives and just really get some of that buy-in?
That's a great question, and it really starts, the journey really starts with level setting around the definitions. So when you have different stakeholders saying something is high, but it means very different things to each of them, we need to get some alignment on and consistency in the rating of the impact, in the rating of the likelihood, and what that actually translates into from a risk perspective. Moreover, we need to be able to visualize this in both qualitative as well as quantitative. And you really use this as a way for management to demonstrate to the board and external parties that they've made a tremendous amount of progress and really take some credit for the things that they've done. And so by being able to show that marked risk reduction and show it both qualitatively and quantitatively, as you see on this screen, 721 inherent risk points down to 86 for the overall assurance management. And then having a drill down into the underlying specific areas behind that. Really gives our clients an ability to show off a little and let management know where those investments are paying off, as well as help them better understand why there's still some more work to be done, and show the lifetime reduction of risk. In this example here, this client had an over 80% reduction in risk, which is tremendous. They'd done a lot of work in this space, and they felt very good about it. Management really had a better understanding of then where those additional investments were needed. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a pretty impressive story there.
And what you're seeing now on the screen is one of the dashboards within ServiceNow, and showing that before and after picture of inherent risk, as well as that drill down into the specific, in this example, identity and access management related topics, and showing how those inherent risks have really materially been moved down.
And that kind of just speaks to the value of the platform itself. Realistically, I never think about any other product or vendor, because I think we're the best. The thing that it concerns me is the people who are just still using Excel, still using SharePoint and some of those things, and what they're really missing out on. And I love the way that you guys are able to quickly get this data together and then provide it in a way that allows, it really transforms the way that these people are able to perform their functions. I mean, it's totally transforming for them.
No, absolutely. And this was back to the point about, this takes something like 4 to 6 weeks to do. And, one of the examples that David was showing that previous slide has actually made their way to audit committees and boards of directors.
Right.
And they actually said something to the effect of, this is the first time I understand where all my investments are going and why we're spending this money and why we need to continue doing so. So it's a really good, useful tool for those types of conversations as well.
Yeah, definitely. So coming up on this next question, realistically speaking, we deal with healthcare. There are so many different regulations. And one of the things that a lot of customers ask us is, I recently had a customer ask me if they could use the vendor management function and list themselves as a vendor, so that they could just put themselves through the assessments that they force other people to do. So how are you guys helping people respond to these audits and really help organize these thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get a lot of clients where they've got internal audit requesting data, external audit, other supervisory bodies, external regulators, and then a variety of internal teams, privacy teams, security teams, all effectively asking the same information. And our answer to that is we've developed an evidence warehouse. And so what's happening is clients want to be able to assess once, test once, and satisfy many. And this evidence warehouse allows them to do that. So from the perspective of Active Directory, so I'll take an Active Directory example for this. Many of your applications ostensibly would be hooking into Active Directory for authentication, and rather than responding to that hundreds of times for your hundreds of applications, you're able to pull the approved and reviewed evidence and test results, etc., from these evidence boxes. And so there would be an evidence box around access control and related topics that would pull in that Active Directory, and you're then able to achieve that goal of assess once, test once, and satisfy many.
So Gordon's going to give us a quick peek of what that looks like in one of our environments.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we have here is the evidence warehouse module. And within that module, we have these different evidence boxes. So we have one here that's already been completed and supplied around just kind of like a SIM application logging tool.
Hold on a second, apologies for that. There it is. And so the workflow kind of proceeds from collection. So we're collecting the evidence, we've prepared it, everything's good to go. And then when we actually start using the evidence in the environment and supplying it to the testing engagements and control tests, that's when it's in its applied state. And then year over year, when it's time to renew the evidence or recertify the next year, we can archive the previous versions and begin preparing a new package. And so each one of these evidence boxes can be linked to a variety of different objects in the compliance space. So right here, we can link them to control objectives. We can link them to the entities for which they apply. So in this example, Workday and Windows Server are both leveraging this SIM application logging tool. So they're both incorporated in this evidence box so that whenever these controls down here go to be tested, as they are in this PCI audit engagement, those evidence boxes are automatically linked into that control test. So if we go into one of those control tests here, we can see that is brought on board. And so the process of actually preparing the evidence box is pretty straightforward. So we'll go back here to the evidence warehouse. And we've got this Lawson one that we're still in the collection phase. So it's for the Lawson application. And so similar to the example David was talking about earlier, where you have your Active Directory evidence that's being used by multiple systems, there's also the use case where multiple parties, so like potentially PCI, HIPAA, your internal audit team, external auditors, are all wanting to test the same controls. So you can still leverage that comply with many assess once philosophy by just attaching the same evidence box to those assessments. So it starts with Lawson ERP control evidence. So we come down here and we say, okay, we're going to link our related controls. First, we're going to edit our entity. So we're going to find the Lawson application associated with the evidence box. And then we can automatically link related controls just by selecting. So if we had multiple, we can select that, but we'll link the related controls. It'll let us know that I've linked 28 records, and there happens to be 20 controls associated with that Lawson application. And then to add the attachments and evidence to the box, it's simply just a matter of finding the files. And dragging and dropping. We'll go ahead and reload the form. We don't even have to. And there we go. We've got our evidence here. It keeps track of the attachments. It keeps an audit log of everything done in the evidence box. We have traceability into what's going on. We'll go ahead next and go to a control testing engagement. And so if we come down here to this HIPAA audit, we can say that Lawson is in scope for this HIPAA audit. So we'll again search for Lawson. We'll go ahead and add it to this engagement. And then as we go to the validate stage in our control testing engagement, it'll bring in all of our controls. It'll bring in the test plans associated with those controls. And then following the standard audit process, we can go ahead and generate those control tests. And so we're still in the validate state, preparing for the audit that's going to be happening shortly. And then now that we've got all of our control testing tasks, we can go ahead and also say, hey, let's get all of our controls. We want to bring in all of the evidence boxes associated with these controls. So we'll go ahead and select our controls. We'll link the related evidence boxes. And it looks like 2 evidence boxes that we have applied to the controls in our list. So that one we just had, as well as a backup procedures and evidence box. So it looks like Lawson is leveraging the organizational backup policies and protocols. So it's going to go ahead and bring in those evidence boxes there. And then we can say, okay, let's link it to our control tests. So we link it to our control tests. It links it to 10 records. So 10 of these control tests, or 10 of these 10 evidence box control test mappings. And if we actually go into the backup one, we can see down below that it went ahead and it linked in just the general Lawson specific control evidence as well as the backup procedures. And what the process before allows you to do too is if we only wanted, for example, to bring in or link the Lawson one, we could have just only checked that box. So it gives you the fine-tooth granularity you still need in terms of what evidence you want to bring in, because there could potentially be a variety of things out there associated with Lawson, but maybe only certain things apply for HIPAA. So So you can tag your evidence boxes like you tag a normal record in ServiceNow and et cetera, but it basically allows you to have that assess once, comply with many mindset and be able to link in all of your evidence without having to upload those same 3 attachments all over the place throughout the system and potentially run into versioning issues, et cetera. So it really is a streamlined process and provides that overarching container that you would need. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Cliff.
Alrighty, so everything we talked about thus far has been about things that you guys are currently doing. What does the future look like, though? What do you have in the pipeline?
Absolutely, Cliff. Now, that's a great question. Again, this is Brian speaking. So I know we spoke about the data classification engine, and we spoke specifically about what we're doing with the evidence warehouses and the evidence boxes. So the top 2 things on the screen here, those are really all of the things that you see here are in the process of being packaged up as applications that are coming to the ServiceNow store. We're hoping to have those up there in advance of Knowledge in May as part of the release there. So that data classification engine and that evidence warehouse will be up there, for then. Additionally, there's a few other things that, might make sense for organizations to be thinking about. We have 2 additional healthcare-specific applications that we're building. One is specifically around enhanced healthcare compliance reporting. So think about an easy button that will allow you to demonstrate and link together based on all of the compliance requirements that you have. How can you report mandate by mandate, all the evidence and how you are performing for each of those requirements. So really kind of that mandate linking type reporting. So some enhanced compliance reporting, as well as a process around incident and complaint management with leveraging the service portal and being able to have an intake process to manage incidents and complaints specific to healthcare compliance. So those additional capabilities around reporting and as well as around incident and complaint management, those are ready for us to demo and to showcase. We are talking to clients about those today. Many of these things actually we build alongside of our clients so we can get the industry's fingerprint on this as well. And those 2 as well will be packaged up for the ServiceNow store, again, hopefully in advance of Knowledge. And then the remaining pieces here are really some integration pieces with some of our joint partners that we have as well with SailPoint and Microsoft. So what we're working on right now is a SailPoint integration. For those who are familiar with identity and access management programs, often there is a connection already for ticketing and what they call last mile provisioning between SailPoint and ServiceNow. What we're doing, though, is going to take some of the data now being generated by the campaigns in SailPoint and bring that all the way back into ServiceNow IRM and being able to link that to specific entities or profiles and ultimately control activities so that you can do risk and compliance reporting from an identity perspective, but bringing that data and those results back in to the GRC, IRM, and GRC modules. So that's something that we're excited to do, and we're working with a few clients with some of this wider risk vision reporting that includes identity.
Alrighty, so last question of the day, and then I believe we have a couple questions that came in through the live channel, but people are obviously going to get excited. They're seeing all the content that you put out. It's absolutely ridiculous if you're a healthcare person how much value you guys are able to bring. So what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yep, so the easiest way is a few things here. So this is Brian Risman speaking again from Edgile. Here's my contact information. Feel free to send me a note, give me a ring. Very happy to speak to any kind of solutions, use cases, or questions that you have. Here's a few links here as well. We'll share this deck with everybody through the community. But if you go to store.servicenow.com, that's where you'll see the 18 applications, looking to be something like 24 total applications in the coming weeks. That's Edgile's website. And then we specifically have a resource website. If you go to edgile.com/now, it'll bring you to a landing page that has some solution briefs and case studies based on what we're doing from an IRM and GRC perspective.
All right, perfect. And I like that you put your number out there. People call you at all hours of the night.
It's just like you, Cliff.
Exactly. All right, so a couple questions that came in. First up is regarding compliance requirements and staying close with Microsoft solutions. Is there a successful showcase of utilizing electronic signature plugin within Azure AD environment? I know natively we have electronic signatures in the platform. We also have integrations in with DocuSign. So is there something specific to the Azure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I surmise that the individual who asked that is thinking around, 21 CFR Part 11 and those specific electronic signatures as required by the FDA. When we get into some of those situations, one of the unique value propositions that Edgile has to offer is that we have a partnership with one of the top 5 international law firms, McDermott, Will, and Emery, and we will either work under attorney-client privilege on their contract with a healthcare organization, or on our own and use them as our counsel, and then we're able to really dive into the details of what specifically is being asked, and we can get then their advice and input around how we're both interpreting as well as implementing the solution. So how we're interpreting the law, what some of the precedents are around that, and more color. We're not deep experts in every single law and regulation, and so we need help as well, and that really helps us offer our clients that full suite of service.
All righty, and then the last question. If someone were looking to do an implementation later in the year, what are some things they could do now to start prepping for it?
Yeah, so off the cuff, I would think starting to think about what their risk methodology would entail, getting some alignment on impact scales, financial materiality levels, as well as starting to understand how the organization wants to represent themselves from a risk and compliance perspective, how they want to model the operating environment. Internal audit may have a way of looking at the world. IT may have a very different way of looking at the world, and business may have yet a third way of looking at it. So one of the ways that we like to get started with our clients is really taking the Socratic method, understanding what questions need to be answered, and then visualizing the end state reporting that they're going to get out of that to then help ensure that the solution at the end of the day is going to be able to answer those hard questions.
Agreed. I think it's all about figuring out what your endpoint looks like, and then you guys really helping them home on that.
Well, it's interesting. We're working on a lot of migrations at the moment from legacy GRC tools to the platform. And, a lot of folks think this is just really a pure lift and shift. And the same reports and the same data that I had previously, I want to go bring that now into ServiceNow. And really, as we start coming through it, they're not even using some of that data that they're maintaining to answer the questions they really want. Right. So it's really important to think about some of those activities as really transformative, and to really take a step back and say, what questions do I need to answer, and do I really need all this data, or are there gaps in my data that I need, in order to answer those questions? So we see it a lot often on those migrations, which we're spending a lot of time working with you guys on.
Yeah, definitely. All right. With that, this has been a great 49 minutes. So definitely appreciate you guys making yourself available. And we are out.
Great. Thanks very much, Cliff. Look forward to speaking to everyone.
Thank you all. See you on the community.